challenge of properly compensating the best player in the NFL by far.
He recognized that he wanted to give the club the flexibility to build the team around him. No matter, what he makes over his career, I'm sure one way or another he'll be underpaid.
Tom Brady is widely considered to be the greatest football player of all time. And if there's one human being that could potentially beat his incredible list of achievements, it's Patrick Mahomes. No, I'm not saying this as like some crazed lunatic fan. It's actually the truth. But there's one thing that we've seen in the past that could sabotage everything for Patrick Mahomes. And we're going to get to that in just a sec. Before we get to the content, we're on the grind to 700,000 subscribers. And when we get there, we're going to be giving away $500 to 5 subscribers that turn on their notifications on this channel. And now that we get all that out of the way, work! Can I be honest for a second? The one thing that changed sports for me forever is Prize Picks. Just having a little extra action on the game has made watching games so much more enjoyable, and I've actually been using this to get into other sports as well. A lot of you have DM'd me the amount of money that you guys are making off of Prize Picks, and I post my picks onto my Instagram story every single day. And right now, if you use my promo code Mikerophone, they'll match your first deposit up to $100. Mic check 1212. What's going on, everybody? I never thought that we would ever see a player just come out of nowhere and scratch the surface of greatness that Tom Brady had. I mean, we've seen players get very close, but I don't think there's a player that has the opportunity to potentially get there more than Patrick Mahomes. And it comes from multiple facets. The first one being the fact that Patrick Mahomes clearly is a gifted football player. I mean, this past year, he won NFL MVP. He won the Super Bowl. He threw for over 5,000 passing yards, 41 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions, while the Kansas City Chiefs also traded his best wide receiver away, and he had to create a rapport with some brand new wide receivers as well, which, by the way, he's going to have to do again this season. But let's put that aside, because obviously he has the on-field talent. There's not a lot of quarterbacks that understand how the NFL salary cap works more than Patrick Mahomes. Typically, quarterbacks try to hold out to make as much money as they possibly can. In the case of Tom Brady, he was swayed by the Patriot way and Bill Belichick, and the fact that his wife at the time was one of the most successful supermodels of all time. Tom Brady didn't necessarily chase market-setting contracts throughout the prime of his career, and I think that definitely played a hand into his success as well. 3 years ago, Patrick Mahomes signed a 10-year, $450 million contract extension with the Kansas City Chiefs, worth up to $475 million with incentives. So this paid him $45 million a year annually. Prior to this, quarterbacks were getting paid $35 million a year annually, and this deal runs until the 2031 season. Now, at the time, there was one critique about the deal: the fact that signing a contract for that long could potentially make the contract outdated, and Patrick Mahomes actually did his best to forecast that, but that didn't necessarily become the case. A little over a year after Mahomes' deal, Josh Allen signed a 6-year, $258 million contract extension, averaging $43 million a year. And then Aaron Rodgers became the first $50 million per year quarterback in March of 2022. Deshaun Watson would sign a fully guaranteed 5-year, $230 million contract following a trade from the Texans to the Browns. Now you have Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson beating out Patrick Mahomes' contract as well. And now with the recent extensions of Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, both averaging $51 and $52 million a year annually, this is before Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow get their contract extensions, Mahomes might be the 9th highest paid QB in the entire NFL. I don't necessarily know how much he cares about this, because I think this is going to play out to his favor quite wonderfully. Now, you currently have the general manager of the Kansas City Chiefs saying that he expects to revisit the Patrick Mahomes contract, and he's going to get a pay bump prior to the beginning of the 2023 season. So Mahomes actually has a decision to make in this regard, and historically, he seemed content with the amount of money he makes, and the fact that he was able to win a Super Bowl while making this type of money is no easy task. He's the only quarterback I know of that signed a top 5 quarterback contract and still won a Super Bowl despite being under contract for that long. Could you just think about how great you have to be to win a Super Bowl despite your best wide receiver getting traded, who is clearly a top 2 or top 3 wide receiver in the entire NFL? So Patrick Mahomes does have a huge decision to make in regards to his contract. But what if I told you this video isn't even about Patrick Mahomes' contract? Because, well, it's more about the talent surrounding Patrick Mahomes. Last year, there was a huge question about how much success you could expect Mahomes to have as a result of the Kansas City Chiefs trading away Tyreek Hill for draft picks. It's something that we all expected at some point or another. Whenever you pay your quarterback that maximum contract, it might be difficult to retain all the talent around him. And in the case of the Chiefs, they let go of Tyreek Hill and they parted ways with Tyrann Mathieu as well. It seemed like the Chiefs decided to invest heavily in the offensive line instead, trading for Orlando Brown Jr. a few years prior and bringing in Joe Thuney as well after Patrick Mahomes suffered his first loss in the Super Bowl versus Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this is what brings me to my current concern about Mahomes. I'm not necessarily worried about the human beings he's going to throw the football to. I'm not necessarily worried about the fact that Eric Bieniemy is now with the Washington Commanders as opposed to the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, hell, it seems like Kadarius Toney might be the new #1 guy on the Kansas City Chiefs, and if that is the case, I genuinely love that for him because he was getting compared to Tyreek Hill during the pre-draft process, so seeing him in this situation would be awesome. I'm really happy for him, and it seemed like in a limited capacity after a midseason trade, he was a remarkable weapon for the Kansas City Chiefs last year. Maybe Sky Moore takes the next step. Maybe Justin Ross comes out of nowhere and starts dominating for the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not necessarily worried about the human beings that are catching passes from Patrick Mahomes. Rather, I'm a little bit more concerned about the human beings that are in charge of protecting Patrick Mahomes. For those of you guys that forget, Patrick Mahomes was quite literally hobbling in the AFC Championship game and in the Super Bowl. And we've already seen him play against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with a battered offensive line before, and that was primarily due to injury, not necessarily because the Kansas City Chiefs had an existing terrible offensive line. Following this, the Chiefs decided to completely redo their offensive line, like we mentioned earlier in the video, and it seems like once again, they're completely remaking their offensive line. I mean, earlier on in the offseason, they couldn't come to an agreement with Orlando Brown Jr., which, by the way, is still something that is very interesting to me. A situation where Orlando Brown Jr. clearly was a pretty good left tackle, I'm not gonna lie, a above average left tackle, but not necessarily a once in a generation type left tackle to me. You would think a left tackle like that would try to secure the bag and try to secure himself as much money as he possibly could. He took the opposite approach. He took a contract that paid him significantly more in the short term so he could hit free agency again one more time in his prime so he could get himself another bag. Pretty much the exact opposite of what Patrick Mahomes did is what Orlando Brown Jr. did. Once Orlando Brown Jr. decided to sign with the Cincinnati Bengals, the Kansas City Chiefs decided to sign Jawan Taylor to a large contract. Now, originally, the philosophy was that Jawan Taylor was going to protect Patrick Mahomes' blind side. That doesn't seem to be the case. It looks like Jawan Taylor is actually going to stay at the right tackle position because we have reports suggesting that Jawan Taylor has had some trouble shifting over to left tackle, which is kind of remarkable considering how hell-bent Orlando Brown Jr. was to playing left tackle and not right tackle. I mean, that's the whole reason why he left the Baltimore Ravens to begin with. They had Rodney Stanley there. He filled in for Stanley. He showed that he was a more than capable left tackle, and left tackles make significantly more money than right tackle, so I don't really blame him for doing that. So you would think Jawan Taylor would really have a fire lit under his ass to try to move over to left tackle as soon as possible, despite signing a huge contract recently. But at the same time, I do understand it's very difficult to go from right tackle to left tackle. The best way I could explain it is imagine how you write currently being with your right hand is what I'm assuming. And then all of a sudden you have to start writing with your left hand. It's a similar learning curve and it's very difficult to get adjusted to. So I don't necessarily blame him for taking some time to figure that out, but I am a little concerned because the Kansas City Chiefs decided to bring in Donovan Smith to play left tackle for them until Jawan Taylor figures it out. Now, here's what I'm concerned about. Donovan Smith has had a very shaky history, and I don't necessarily know how much I trust him as a pass protector, not because I think he's terrible, but because the offense that he was in, at least during the Bruce Arians era with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, was very much an offense that understood that Tom Brady needed to get the football out of his hands as soon as freaking possible. And as a result result of that, if you look at his 2021 season, at least on Pro Football Focus, which I know I'm a casual, but this is the easiest way for me to determine how proficient and effective offensive linemen were. It's very difficult to actually look up tape on offensive linemen in general, so forgive me for being a casual here. In 2021, he had tremendous PFF grades. I mean, overall 83.3, pass blocking 84.7, run blocking 70, and then this past season, he was one of the most penalized offensive tackles in the entire NFL. On top of that, his run blocking and pass blocking definitely took a hit, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were also injured, and they were going through a clear transition period, and honestly, they never were able to figure it out during the 2022 season. I'm a little concerned here, because if you remember, following their Super Bowl defeat at the hands of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it seemed like the Chiefs were hell-bent on making sure Patrick Mahomes had the greatest offensive line of all time, and had plenty of time to cook and improvise and create plays. And to be honest, that worked. Again, it's a very difficult achievement to win a Super Bowl when you're a top 5 paid QB in the NFL, and Mahomes freaking did it. And it was primarily based upon that philosophy: make sure that he has a good offensive line to protect him so he could cook. And it looks like the Chiefs might be straying away from that philosophy. Now, I understand what you might be thinking here. What other choice do they have? And to be fair, you make a good point. All they could do is try to hit in the draft with their third round pick of Wanya Morris, but considering how they lost Orlando Brown Jr. and Andrew Wiley, and I don't really have as much confidence in their fill-ins, I'm not saying this will destroy Patrick Mahomes, but I am going to say if there's one thing that could sabotage Patrick Mahomes, it's a weak offensive line. I mean, he could go into the season with wide receivers that he may not have established chemistry with, or it's his first time playing with them, and he could still be successful and win you a Super Bowl, which is insane to me, and I'll keep repeating that. Like, that is not normal at all whatsoever. But I think the one thing that could completely sabotage Patrick Mahomes is the lack of a proficient offensive line. And I hope that isn't the case, because I'm a huge fan of his. I love watching him play. But I figured this is something that we needed to discuss. I needed to get out to you guys. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, especially if you're a Chiefs fan. Do you think I'm overreacting? Do you have more optimism in Jawan Taylor and Donovan Smith than I do? Is there something I may have neglected to share in this video? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.